our previous video, we created a class and made objects from it. Each object had its own separate data table, and two objects never shared the same table, they each had their own copy. But an object isn't just data, it also has behavior, and in OOPS, behavior is stored inside the class, not inside each object. Here's why that matters. That way, multiple objects can use the same behavior function from the class whenever they need it. Each of them don't carry their own private copy of that function. For example, say we have a function called takeDamage. When it runs, it lowers an object's health. If every single object stored its own copy of takeDamage inside its own data table, that would waste a ton of space, especially if you have hundreds of NPCs. So instead, we store the function once inside the class, and every object shares that same function. Now you're probably wondering, how do we create this function? How do objects access it? And how does one function end up working for many different objects? Let's go through it step by step. First, we store the function inside the class. In our case, the class is NPC, so we add a function called takeDamage inside it. We give it one parameter, I'm calling it self, though you could technically name it anything. We use this parameter because we're going to pass something into the function when we call it. Inside the function, we write self.health -20. Don't worry about this part yet, that's coming up next. To use this function on an object, we write it like this: objectName.functionName. So to make our zombie take damage, we call it like this. Here we pass the zombie table in as the argument. Let's break down what's actually happening here. When the zombie object was created, it became a table. Now we're calling takeDamage on that zombie table, but the function itself doesn't live inside zombie. It lives inside NPC. So how does zombie find it? Here's the trick. When we created the zombie, we connected the NPC table to it as a meta table. So the zombie table is linked to NPC behind the scenes. So when we call takeDamage on zombie, Lua first checks. Does zombie have a function called takeDamage? No. So Lua checks the meta table NPC. It finds takeDamage there and uses it. That's how an object accesses a function that actually lives inside the class. Now, because we passed the zombie table in as the argument, that value gets caught by our function's parameter, so self becomes the zombie table. Inside the function, self.health is now zombie's health. We subtract 20 from it and the result is 80. Our zombie just took 20 damage. Now let's say we want to damage a skeleton instead. We call the function like this. This time passing in the skeleton table, not the zombie table. Lua does the exact same lookup. It checks skeleton, doesn't find takeDamage. Checks skeleton's meta table, which is also NPC, since we linked it the same way when we created the skeleton, and finds takeDamage there. This time, self becomes the skeleton table. So self.health refers to skeleton's health, not zombies. The function reduces skeleton's health by 20, completely separate from zombie. When working with functions like this, keep three things in mind. First, if a function will be used by every object of that type, like every NPC, then keep it in the class, not inside individual objects. Second, when you call a function on an object, you pass that same object in as the argument. That's what lets the function modify that specific object's data. Third, inside the function, the key name you use, like self.health, has to exactly match the key already stored in the object's table. Here's an important detail people miss. When zombie takes damage, the function prints 80, but if you check zombie's health afterward, it still shows 100. Why? Because we only calculated the new value. We never saved it back into the table. To fix that, we write self.health equals self.health -20. Now the new value actually gets stored back into the object's health key, so it sticks for next time. That's the core idea of functions in OOPS, and we're one function stored in the class, shared by every object, but always working on whichever object you pass into it. Okay, so that's the beginner way of writing and calling functions. Now let's look at the way most developers, and pretty much every Roblox dev, actually write it. Good news, it's almost identical to what we just learned. Just a small syntax twist. Instead of writing the function with a dot, we write it using a colon. Function npc : takeDamage. Notice something missing? We don't write self as a parameter anymore. The colon handles that for us automatically. I'll explain exactly how in a second. Inside the function, we still use self.health to access and modify the object's health exactly like before. The only rule here is, you must use self. You can't name it anything else, since the colon automatically creates self parameter for you. To call this function on an object, we write zombie : takeDamage, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. That's it. No passing the zombie table in manually, the colon does it for us. So why does the colon let us skip passing the object? When you call a function using a colon, Lua automatically passes the object you're calling it on. into the function for you and stores it in a built-in variable called self. So when we call zombie:"take damage," the zombie object automatically gets sent into the function, and inside that function, self variable automatically created and set equal to zombie without us writing that ourselves. That's the entire difference. Everything else works exactly the same as the beginner way. Lua still checks the zombie table first, doesn't find take damage, checks the meta table, finds it in NPC, and runs it using zombie as self. And since the colon only handles passing the object automatically, you can still add your own parameters normally, just like any other function. Here I declare a parameter called damage, and when I call the function, I pass in 10 as the argument. As a result, the zombie's health drops by 10, and I get 90 as the output. So the key points to remember while writing in developer way are: 1. You define the function using a colon. 2. Inside the function, you access and modify data using self. 3. You call the function using a colon too, and Lua automatically passes the object in for you. It gives same result as the beginner way, just cleaner and less to type every time you call a function. And that's it. That's how functions and behavior actually work in object-oriented program. One function, stored once inside the class, shared across every object, always operating on whichever object called it. If this helped, drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you in the next one.